women making moves, where we celebrate the moves that women are making. My name is Amy Ponce, founder of Unlock the Magic, Coaching and Healing. I'm joined today with Dr. Sera Lavelle. Sera Lavelle is a clinical psychologist, serial entrepreneur, and founder of Be a Better Eating, an AI-powered platform transforming how we address emotional eating. She also owns two of New York City's top-rated therapy practices known for delivering compassionate, evidence-based mental health care. On a mission to remove the shame and stigma from food struggles, Dr. Lavelle challenges the societal narrative that frames these issues as failures of willpower or nutrition knowledge, when in reality, they are emotional battles that deserve real psychological support. By reframing the conversation, she helps individuals stop feeling like failures and start genuine healing. Dr. Sera, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Fun fact, I lived in New York in the East Village for about a year, and it was so fun. And also I was like clamoring to get back to like a place where I could walk across like a big room. I had this tiny little apartment.
I actually, believe it or not, I don't live in New York
Okay.
anymore either. Actually,
Okay.
I fly back and forth, but I have 7-year-old twins,
Yeah.
and we decided to make the move as well. You know, we wanted more space, but we also want to be walkable by downtown, but we also want to be to the water. And so I feel like we have the best of both worlds, being able to visit whenever we want, but also being in a place that's warmer and sunnier, and that we have more space, and that's what works for our family. But then I love going back to New York.
I haven't been back since I moved, and this
Mhm.
was such a long time ago. And it was such a short amount of time, but it was such a cool experience. I had never ventured out of the Midwest. I'm in Chicago, and
Mm-hmm.
I was raised in Central Illinois. And so it was such an adventure, but also
Mm-hmm.
way out of my depth. But it also
Mm-hmm.
expanded me beyond, which is
Mm-hmm.
awesome. And it gave me such a cool perspective on just humanity. Like I felt less judged in New York City than I did in like my
Mm-hmm.
tiny small hometown.
Oh, absolutely. I say that all the time. So people always ask me, don't people judge you? And it's, being in Florida now, people
Oh,
judge you way more here in Florida than they do
yeah,
in New
New
York
York,
City.
they're just
Nobody
like
has time to judge you.
nobody has time, nobody cares.
Yeah.
It's just like whatever, just
Yeah.
literally like do you. I really
Yeah.
appreciated that vibe. So I was like, okay, we're all out here just doing our
Hmm.
best. So
Yeah.
there was a cool humane piece there when I lived there. So
Yeah, and then I also noticed most places, you're going to have this kind of homogenous social circle, right? Where in New York City, I felt like people within the same social circle be all different races, all different social classes, all different like amounts of wealth, all like, and it didn't really matter as much.
yeah.
Whereas I feel like other places I've lived, people feel like, oh, I only want to be people around me. And I think it's a mentality where people are like, actually, I don't want to be around people like me.
hmm
I want to expand my horizons.
I
Right?
genuinely didn't anymore. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
that's perfectly what led me into the next chapter of my life
Mm-hmm.
that has culminated into these days. And you're absolutely right. We would go to brunch and then like meet people and they are, I don't know, billionaires from across the world and they're like, "Do you want to spend
Mm-hmm.
the day together?" It's like, "What? Okay."
Exactly.
Sure. And
Mm-hmm.
it was just like a kind of a cool community. So anyway,
Mm-hmm.
I read New York and I'm like, I've always got to share my story. So Sarah, thanks so much for coming together. We were called to this space because you had made this really important post that a lot of us should be talking about more, which is the, I don't know if you want to call it the line or the overlap or the relationship between coaching and therapy, because
Mm-hmm.
the original post that I commented back on that you
Mm-hmm.
had said, thanks so much for this perspective. I'm a certified coach, not a licensed
Mm-hmm.
therapist. And
Yeah.
you had mentioned that you have heard, or in your industry, many therapists have expanded their practice to include coaching. And
Mm-hmm.
your post originally was about being mindful about that crossover.
Yeah.
And I wrote back and I said, yes, this, all therapists are not coaches. All coaches are not therapists. Well, no coaches are therapists
Mm-hmm.
unless you're licensed,
Yeah.
by the way. So I've been like beautifully asking the universe for about 2 years since
Mm-hmm.
I opened my business to bring a therapist on to my podcast to talk about this
Mm-hmm.
very topic, about the relationship and crossover. And it was beautifully, divinely. I saw your post. I commented. You're like, yes. And I'm like, come on to the show. Let's talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me more. Let's talk more about where this came from within you. And then
Mm-hmm.
I want to get into more about your thoughts on the
Mm-hmm.
crossover line, contrast, relationship, all the things. And we
Mm-hmm.
provide such a throughput to those not necessarily understanding the difference right now.
Oh, I have so much to say. I'm like, I don't even know where to start with it. First of all, I had so many wonderful comments. I think 80,000 people viewed that post and 200 people added comments.
Yeah,
And it was clear that some people understood what I was talking about and about like the clarity to the public. And
yes.
then some people thought I was trying to promote one is better than the other, which
Oh,
in no way
they
do
work
I.
together. I
They were,
advocate.
yeah.
Yeah, I advocate. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I share with clients when they're dipping into a therapy moment.
Mm-hmm.
I'll
Yeah.
I'll give a pause. 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
Let's jot that down for therapy
Mm-hmm.
and come back to coaching.
And that's how it should be, right? And I was very clear to say, actually, I recommend my patients to coaches all the time
Yeah,
because there are a lot of things that aren't in my skill set that fall under coaching, right? And even when we talk about therapists also doing coaching, well, even that, I see a little bit of it's not that I just think coaches shouldn't act like therapists. There are some therapists that are really just trying to practice therapy across straight lines and kind of recoding it as coaching so they can get out of,
I
having to
see.
provide a diagnostic code. You are very limited as a psychologist where you can practice, right? So even with telehealth, when we're in New York, we can't even see a patient remotely who's 5 minutes away in New Jersey, right? And so I do see this temptation to say, hey, is there kind of this workaround? And even maybe some jealousy that coaches have kind of the
Thanks for
freedom of
saying that.
flexibility.
I wondered, like
Mm-hmm.
it was coming into my consciousness as you were
Mm-hmm.
saying that. It's like, is there jealousy that, and by the way,
Uh-huh.
I think we will be a licensed field at some point because of,
Uh-huh. Yeah. But if you look at all of the coaching programs that are the good quality coaching programs, they really do a lot to help people have a frame for it, and not to get outside of their bounds, right?
that's
Um,
exactly right. I recommend getting certified because
hmm
that taught me, I've been a coach my
hmm
entire life
yeah.
as a people leader in corporate,
hmm
but the actual certification gave me guardrails to understand where my
Yeah.
bounds. So
And that's what's great. What was interesting about it was there were a couple of people that took it out of context, but I had so many coaches championing it and actually saying, thank you for providing the clarity. And what I think is the problem is when you kind of blur these terms. Now, are you doing something like illegal? Are you doing something unethical? I don't even know if I think that's true. However, it's still thinking about the person on the other side and what they might be thinking, right? So if you say something like mental health coach, I'm not saying you can't, and I'm not saying that maybe even you're not intentionally deceiving somebody. However, a person with schizophrenia might hear mental health and paired with coach and think, oh, this person is able to help me with this mental health issue. And even putting something like even mental wellness, I think provides some clarity. But at the end of the day, you're really like saying life coach or career coach or spiritual coach, I think is the way to provide the most clarity. And so it goes, I think, on both sides. I think there's some coaches that very non-intentionally might think, hey, I have this experience in trauma. I could be like a mental health trauma coach. And as long as I'm saying the word coach, that they're okay. And then also, I think there are therapists that say, hey, I'm a psychologist, so of course I can coach. And all of a sudden, they're seeing their patient who has an eating disorder and they're like, okay, their patient moves to another state, and they're like, oh, I could still coach them. But what are you supposed to say then when they start talking about their eating disorder? Could you say, I'm sorry, I'm a therapist, but I'm only seeing you for coaching. You can't talk to me about that. And that can create some conflicts as well. I would recommend if a therapist does have coaching practice, they are separate clients.
I agree. Even for me,
Mm-hmm.
I am a certified life coach and certified
Mm-hmm.
energy healer.
Mm-hmm.
And because my 20 years in corporate, like
Mm-hmm.
marketing comes easy to me. That's what I did for 20
Mm-hmm.
years. Even that, I will create separate agreements depending on what we're doing together. And
Yeah.
even though like my coaching will probably overlap in all three of those services,
Mm-hmm.
it's still very important to me to hold our focus on
Mm-hmm.
originally what you're originally hiring me for, or like what service
Yeah.
you're wanting to do. So high level, and I want your thoughts on this too. The way that I would define in the most simplest terms between, I'm going to bring in mentors to this too,
Okay.
therapists, coaches, and mentors.
Okay.
Therapists are medically trained professionals that deal with diagnoses and
Hmm.
possibly medication, and it's more of the
Hmm.
medical side. It's
Yeah.
the medical part. Whereas
Yeah.
coaching is not medical, not
Hmm.
diagnosis, not advice. And I'll take it from me personally. I am extracting what's already in you
Hmm.
that might be something that your head based on like lifelong programming. I couldn't possibly leave my 9 to 5. Why couldn't you? I will ask my clients, like, what do you want to focus on today? And by the end, we're going to have an action step for that thing that we want to work on. And then mentors is like giving advice based on their lived experience. So again,
Hmm.
high level therapist is medical diagnoses.
Hmm.
Coaching is next step, action steps.
Hmm.
Mentor is like lived experience advice. What do you think on that?
I think that's a great way to put it. I mean, I obviously know the bounds of what therapy is, right? Because we have a licensing board that defines it, right? So, for instance, I could not call myself a therapist or psychologist or mental health provider until I both completed a certain level of schooling and got a license to practice, right? Prior to that, you can't call yourself any of those things. And for instance, New York State and most states define it pretty similarly. It is just as you said, the practice of diagnosing and treating a mental disorder, right?
Yes.
Right.
Oh,
And
that is not coaching, y'all. That is not
that is
coaching.
not coaching. That is not coaching. And again, like I could have a patient who has a severe eating disorder who wants to see even like a nutrition coach. And that is okay. And actually, I recommend it. It doesn't mean they're
Yes.
treating their eating disorder, but we could then work hand in hand, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I'm teaching a person not to eat their emotions, not to try to stuff things down, like how to deal with, not binging and purging, but I'm not going to give them nutrition advice, right?
You're treating the
Mhm.
disorder, and the coach is
Yeah.
treating the next steps as
Hmm.
to like alongside the
Hmm.
treatment of the disorder. So,
Exactly.
and I will say, as an energy coach, energy
Hmm.
healer, I have the ability to read energy, and I'm
Hmm.
already understanding where your body is wanting to go, and your mind
Hmm.
is like, no, no, that's
Yep.
scary. So
Hmm.
I will understand and extract again through body language, through words that you're saying.
Hmm.
And we go to the places, and suddenly you're like, oh, there it is. And then we help your mind get on board with that and go forward. But it's not mental health. It's more of
Hmm.
an energetic understanding, or based on your lived experience, is that a limiting mindset has gotten a little bit jargony, but it's like working with how you believe you're showing up with
Hmm.
this in this world and the infinite possibilities of the infinite
Hmm.
universe, and meeting that energy where it is. But this is the conversation I feel like we need to have more. And I almost feel like therapists and coaches kind of turn away from each other rather than leaning in. Like,
Yeah.
let's talk about this more.
Hmm.
So that's why I
Yeah.
loved the post. And it was like, yes, this more. Because I have to tell you, Sarah, people will come to me and they're like, I love your content. I'm really struggling with X, Y, or Z. And we do have a conversation about, do you have a therapist? Because
Hmm.
while coaches is in a licensed field, we, of
Hmm.
course, there's an international governing body, International Coaching Federation. All to say, yes, I understand the bounds of coaching, and I adhere to the ethics and morals of the coaching
Hmm.
policy. And even in my agreement, with my coaching agreement, I will send, like, I highly recommend you get a therapist. Because
Absolutely.
if we dip back and forth, I'm going to double down on that.
And they could work hand in hand. And going back to that idea of jealousy, right? I mean, I do think there are a lot of therapists that could be triggered by it, right? Because think about this. We went through all the schooling. We
Yeah.
have, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt. And, then we see somebody who's like, hey, calling themselves like a trauma-informed mental health coach. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, well, they could practice across straight lines. They could do that. And of course it's going to trigger them, right? And again, with the clarity, even saying like if a person came out and said, hey, I coach from trauma, I coach on trauma from a lived experience, I work hand in hand with therapists, But then again, there is also part of me that does the field of mental health need to shift? We make it sound like that we're the only people who can benefit from, teaching psychotherapy skills. And yet,
Mhm.
at the end of the day, we are sick care, right?
You said sick? care?
Sick care. People have been using this term a lot on the internet, and I'm not offended by it at all. And it's used to kind of put down psychologists a lot of times. Oh, well, you're in the business of sick care. Well, the thing is that they're absolutely right, right? Because if you look at it, the moment a person no longer meets diagnostic criteria, insurance isn't going to cover it. So you get better, you can't see us anymore. We're not allowed to be preventative. We're not allowed to be wellness. We can say, look, I could see you as a therapist, but look, you're not sick enough for your insurance to cover this, right? And so I am playing both sides in that I do think that tools that therapists use should be able to be used for wellness, right? Like my big thing right now is I find it crazy that we have this divide that says if you have an eating disorder, if you're part of this 9% that has a diagnosable eating disorder, right? Which is pretty severe. To be classified as anorexic, bulimic, or having binge eating disorder, the only real three disorders, they're pretty extreme. But we're saying we can't use psychological tools at all for the other 91% of people that struggle with food,
Mm.
that struggle with emotional eating. Like if you're kind of restricting all day and then eating cookies at night and every day you're in a shame cycle, you don't have an eating disorder. But then is your only option then just nutrition coaching, right? So my app is actually trying to reframe the idea that most eating struggles are psychological and providing a space for people to go, but making sure I provide that clarity, right? So when
That's
people
awesome.
log into my app, it says, hey, just as a reminder, this is for everyday emotional eating struggles. This is for everyday feeling like cravings out of control, but we're not a replacement for therapy and we don't treat disorders. Once you start chatting, we can actually tell, like, not diagnose, but we could say, hey, what you're saying sounds like an eating disorder. While we can't diagnose, it sounds like you might. Would you like me to help you find a therapist in your area? So we provide those two levels of clarity, but I also don't like that we pretend that like everyday struggles shouldn't even be allowed to use any psychological tools. And then this country, 55% of people have downloaded the weight loss app. 12% of people have gone on GLP-1. Those people don't all have eating disorders, but they want psychological help around food.
I feel like in this space and time, and believe me, over the past 2 years, I've gotten a lot of feedback like everybody's a coach. Well, let's take a step back. We're in this space and time where humanity, on any degree that they are meant to in this lifetime,
Mm-hmm.
they are upgrading their own understanding of consciousness and
Mm-hmm.
what they came here to do. And
Mm-hmm.
more importantly, what they came here to feel. And
Mm-hmm.
because there's been such a lockdown for the past several thousand years, here's my personal philosophy. The divine feminine energy of flow creation has been exiled by the divine masculine. And we're only in the imbalanced masculine, which is power, structure, action, etc. We've only been doing things one way. And so
Mm-hmm.
I don't find that like everybody's a coach now. I find more that people are awakening to their, or not even awakening, remembering their own unique brilliance
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily fit in the copy paste that has been put before us. So they
Exactly.
are blazing a new path or a trail. And sometimes that is someone like me that has this 20 years of corporate leadership and like mainstream experience. But also, since I was a child, I've always understood energetics and the metaphysical and the things that we can't see or touch. I say all of this because the same way you're saying, let's explore ways that we can actually use psychotherapy tools in day to day without diagnosing. And there are so many tools that me as a coach,
Oh.
I'm reaching in. I'll say, get into your body. Which chakra energy center do you feel this in? And that's
Mm-hmm.
always connected to an emotion. It's almost like it's listening so intently to allow someone to remember how it feels to feel. But my point is, we're in this space and time where we're not meant to be or do or feel just one thing ever again. It's both,
Mm-hmm.
it's many, it's several. And the more we get outside that copy paste, the more the collective might feel a little bit pinched by that.
Yeah, and you're not wrong. There are some psychologists that could feel very threatened by all coaching and think, hey, that's wrong. But for instance, like I have a therapist and I have a coach, and I also have a healer. And to
So,
me, like, I don't even like, even without explaining the difference, I could feel the difference in my body,
yeah.
right?
That's like the holy trinity right there. Like that's
Right?
I wish for every human to have the resources
Mm-hmm.
to be able to get those three foundational
Mm-hmm.
because being a human in
Mm-hmm.
2025 is
Mm-hmm.
wild, y'all. And so as
Yeah.
much support as you can get on
Mm-hmm.
support for mind, body, and spirit, which is what you just described,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that's what you have gained for yourself, which is so gorgeous. That's the quote unquote
Mm-hmm.
how we're going to get through quote unquote the next
Yeah.
decade, lifetime, have you, the
You
support.
know, yeah, and people are, even when you really think about like healing different modalities, there's a crossover with psychology. Like psychology is getting into so much more, somatic therapy. People are wanting more psychedelic experiences. I do think psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, I do think that psychedelics are a way of like tapping into a higher power. And I think
Yeah.
people who are doing it well can tap into that power. But I think as anything that's powerful, people just abusing it and starting microdosing and dosing from, this guy that they met
Yeah.
is very different, right? I mean, we can't pretend that there's not overlap, but I think wherever the lines are blurrier, that's where we need to create more clarity,
Yes.
right?
And lean into the conversation.
Yeah, lean into the
Like, yeah,
conversation.
instead of like running,
Mm-hmm.
I feel the same way about AI in general right now. It's
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
AI therapists and coaches. A lot of my peers are just rejecting it. I was like,
Yeah.
let's lean in. So
Mm-hmm.
because the more that you, and this is from an energetic standpoint, the more that you
Mm-hmm.
give focus or reject or push something
Mm-hmm.
away, the more it's going to come right back into your sphere. So
Mm-hmm.
deal with it, process it, and then be like, what is that? Where is that coming from? Why? And then like, is there any degree that you can make room for it? Because it'll just get stronger.
Yeah. But I also think about the general trend, right? I mean, I've been thinking about the idea of like good and evil for a long time, right? And well, if you think about it, we were brought up on Star Wars, right? There was the good side and the bad side, right? And if you think about it, like anything in life, the more powerful something is, the more polarizing it is, right? And the more it has the ability for good or bad. So people could be kind of scared of like healing. And people either decide, oh, it's perfectly good or it's perfectly evil, right? And AI, it is very powerful. So it has a huge ability for good and it has a huge ability for evil, right?
Speaking of power,
Mm-hmm.
my entire work and life is that I am a divine being, a spiritual
Mm-hmm.
soul, having a human experience. And
Mm-hmm.
when we remember that, the magic and power we have as an individual to tap into not only the collective, but ourselves and remember that we're one consciousness. Any system put in place that is requiring you not to feel that or remember it
Mm-hmm.
is going to feel threatened by you, like on any
Yeah.
level. So it's like to
Mm-hmm.
think about psychedelics. I want to go to a retreat and with
Mm-hmm.
a medically trained professional to like sit with me and
Yeah.
take me through that experience
Mm-hmm.
to be able to feel that. But you can imagine if all of the power, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean like not just superficial material power, but like
Mm-hmm.
actual intergenerational metaphysical power as human beings, you don't need anything else outside of you. And then
Yeah.
come back to capitalism, that's a problem. So
Yes.
of course, more and more that's going to get squashed. So I feel that this works specifically on any degree, whether it's therapy, coaching, let's all work together. And they're bad actors in
Hmm.
any industry, in
Of
any
course.
across any,
Absolutely.
but the more we can come together and admit like, hey, listen, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like we could develop something that is cohesive together
Mm-hmm.
that touches on our unique brilliance, but also training in school
Mm-hmm.
to say, like, here's what I can offer, but let's do it together rather than shunning.
Mm-hmm.
But
Absolutely.
I get it because almost every client has come to me and they're like, I've had such a horrid coaching experience that they're
Oh,
like
interesting.
so put off.
Hmm.
They're like so put off coaches. And then I've been the saving
Hmm.
grace, quote unquote. It's
Oh,
like,
that's so funny. That's how we are as therapists. We always hear like all the bad story about therapists. I actually not even, I didn't even know there was like all these bad stories with
oh, yeah.
coaches. I was,
Yeah.
yeah.
People come to me, they're like, yeah, I paid $10,000 for a month class, I'm like, that just makes me cringe inside, first of all, because it's like we as coaches, we get to earn a living by
Mhm.
using our ability and skill set to extract what's already in you
Yeah.
and to be your ally alongside your journey. And
Hmm.
to me, this is my opinion,
Hmm.
that is not something that can be put into a course.
Yes.
That is actually what we do together when we build that
Mhm.
sacred energy space. And so I always share very candidly out into the world, be very mindful of how you build or how you choose someone to do this work with.
Hmm. And it has to be the right connection,
Mm,
right? Whether it's coaching or your therapist or your healer, there kind of has to be this sense that they get you,
mhm.
right? And even getting you in different ways. And I might want a different personality type actually on all three, right?
Right.
Yeah. But like they tap into different aspects of who you are.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And gives such a beautiful
Mm-hmm.
full circle. And a lot of women, specifically, I mean, I say I serve humanity, but women feel called with me by virtue of what I talk about out in the wild.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of women coming from corporate, wanting to leave corporate, wanting to do something different than corporate. And it's not
Mm-hmm.
everybody just opening up their own shop because we can't all just be like our own thing. We'll run out of people. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's true. Like we'll run out of people to serve. There's so many.
Well, also, I mean, each therapist has a therapist, right? So, I mean, it's like, would we really run out? Because if we're all healers, but we're
Right.
all going to healers, then I mean, it does work out, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
So what would you say to any therapists, psychologists that do have any stickiness toward the coaching profession?
Hmm. Well, I'd want to know why, right? Like, and I'd probably want to know why and maybe disabuse them of that notion, right? I mean, if they came in with the stereotype of, oh, well, coaches are just people who want to act like therapists but not pay for the schooling, I'd probably say, of course, some, right? But you could say that about many different things, right? I'd probably disabuse that and say, no, there's a lot of people who, have a lot more training in career coaching or executive coaching. I might share my own example of like what I've used coaching in my own life, right? I have a lot of different coaches, actually, if I really think about them. Some are business coaches, some are executive coaches, some are, kind of more mentors. But so, I'd want to know where that idea came from.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's like, help me understand. Because if
Hmm.
there's something that I've put out there, and for me personally, like I said earlier, when a client is walking the
Hmm.
line of like a moment
Hmm.
of a psychological ask or something of the nature, I'll
Hmm.
say, hey, quick pause, just a reminder. Because it's almost like, Sarah, I don't even want to go there. I don't want to go close.
Hmm.
I don't even want to get
Well,
close.
you shouldn't be too afraid of it, right? Because it's like, especially as a healer, I mean, you do want to talk about trauma. Now,
Yeah,
if a person's trauma manifested as OCD, you could still talk about their trauma and even intergenerational trauma and how that affects them spiritually and help
yeah.
them that release that trauma. But you'd still then say, like, look, I could help you, release the trauma in a spiritual way. But
Mhm.
I see that, your thoughts seem kind of OCD. You can diagnose, but like, hey, if they revealed, because it's not uncommon for trauma to manifest in this very mental way that becomes obsessive. You could say, look, we'll focus on kind of the spiritual aspect of it, and you can talk about the trauma. But
Mhm.
I think when it becomes unethical is when like if you were to say, look, once we resolve this spiritually, you'll never need a therapist again,
Oh, no.
or like, you just talk about the aspects of like healing it that you can work with,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Because everything is energy. Energy is everything.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
whatever we're putting our energy toward, and
Hmm.
actually, your thoughts on this, I find that let me not say every,
Hmm.
a lot of physical ailments can be traced back to suppressed energy
Hmm.
that manifests later to something
Yeah,
physical that we have to then do something about.
absolutely.
How do you feel about that from a psychological perspective? Is that energy, or what do you think?
So I think about that energetically, and I'm also careful, right? Because it's like, you don't want to make it sound like, hey, if somebody has cancer, it's necessarily like a blocked energy. But like then again, there's like it definitely like, your energy manifests itself. And
Absolutely.
it's not a perfect correlation, right? I mean, some things are just bad luck, right? But then there are also times I've just working with people, especially since, I do hypnosis is part of our therapy, and people come to us and say things like, it's not uncommon to come to us for things like chronic pain, right?
Yeah.
And right, I still remember this person talking about this chronic pain in their neck, right? And I was like, okay, well, what does that pain feel like, right?
Mhm.
Well, it feels like I'm being pulled in two directions, right? Okay, what does your relationship feel like? Well, it feels like I'm being pulled in two directions, and we could work on that cognitively and even through hypnosis to like change the thoughts. But do I think that person might benefit as well from almost like a spiritual unlocking in a different way? Another way to think about it is kind of how you do conceptualize, and I know I'm going off topic here, but how I do conceptualize psychedelics. And I had such a good conversation with a very highly respected ketamine lab that's, very much into the research. And what they kept explaining to me was ketamine doesn't do anything itself. It just creates a door, a window of like open-mindedness. And then you do psychotherapy within that, right? And I think another way to conceptualize healing would be that you're kind of opening something, it's opening the door. Maybe it's not healing the OCD, but it's helping a person become more open-minded to even seeing a therapist or making the work in the therapy more productive because there's like kind of a sense of openness that you're creating, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like what you just described
Mm-hmm.
about what someone's feeling in their body,
Mm-hmm.
if it's in your shoulders, that could
Mm-hmm.
be between your throat chakra and heart.
Mm-hmm.
What's
Mm-hmm.
going on there? Let's explore the shadow
Yeah.
sides of each of those chakras and what might be going
Mm-hmm.
on. Like, what
Mm-hmm.
comes up for you when I say the shadow side of expression, like actual authentic
Mm-hmm.
expression? What comes up for
Yeah.
you when I say the grief? Like, is there something
Mm-hmm.
that you're grieving or trying to let go? When we work through simply giving focus to those different parts of your body,
Mm-hmm.
people are always stunned. They're like,
Mm-hmm.
I have feelings there. I have emotions there. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And that's energy. And like, are you feeling it? Are you processing it? And again, in such a beautifully spiritual way, a lot of people will be like, well, it's for my highest good. Don't bypass.
Mm-hmm.
Don't bypass though. Feel
Uh-huh.
your feels
Yeah.
like to the fullest expression. Turn them all the way up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or even if you're really thinking, I was just thinking, say like just to make it very kind of clear and differentiating, right? So you'd see that therapist if you
Hmm.
had clinical depression.
Hmm.
Now, if a person is not being fulfilled in their life career,
Hmm.
like is contributing to depression, yeah, seeing a coach does indirectly clear up depression, right? But that's very different than treating depression, right?
Exactly. Exactly. It's like
Mm-hmm.
coaches. I want all coaches to hear me.
Mm-hmm.
You should not be treating anything
Mm-hmm.
that is not your
Mm-hmm.
bounds.
But does that mean a person can't do career coaching if somebody has depression?
No.
I mean, that's just limiting care for a person,
Absolutely not.
right?
I'm saying like coaches don't
Yeah.
you don't
Yeah.
you don't treat things.
Mm-hmm.
You should be supplemental to what that
Yeah.
person already knows about their own
Mm-hmm.
psychological well-being
Mm-hmm.
through
Yeah.
a medical line of support. You are a
Mm-hmm.
supplement.
Yeah, it's a supplement, and yeah, it's a supplement. It's different pieces of the puzzle, but we can't make it sound like, hey, if a person has this, they can only see that person,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
Because it's like it's that person's dealing with the depression directly, but that person also might need help with, well, having a fulfilling career, right?
Exactly.
And if, yeah, and sometimes I do think there's a tendency of therapists to say, oh no, they have depression, they could only see a therapist. But it's really like different people working on different aspects of that person, and they could work hand in hand, right?
Yeah. So do you feel that we've resolved?
I hope so. I hope this gave people a lot of insight. I do think a lot about, things are changing and, some for good and some for bad. There's big pushes to shake up the system because, we don't have a perfect system, right? So it's kind of hard. Where do we make sure we don't throw out the baby with bathwater? I would love coaches, AI, everything, not to replace therapists, but everybody might not love this, but it'd be great if they eliminated the need for us so
Yeah.
often, right? if somebody might fall into a depressive episode, but instead went to a coach when they're doing well and got on a better track, I think society would benefit from fewer people needing a therapist, right?
It would be awesome
Mm-hmm.
if someone had the awareness
Mm-hmm.
that they need some support
Mm-hmm.
beyond a psychological or mental health, something medically treated,
Mm-hmm.
to be proactive about their overall wellness, mind, body, and spirit, so that potentially, and not every
Mm-hmm.
case, that it doesn't get to the point where it does become dis-ease
Yeah.
on the medical realm. So
Mm-hmm.
it's this bigger picture beyond coaches and therapists. It's like I yearn for the day where I don't have to see a different doctor for every single part of my body. Like or
Mm-hmm.
there's like I have a team that I could say, all
Mm-hmm.
right, especially as a woman, I'm heading into perimenopause.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's impacting every other part of my body and system.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's not one person that I can go to
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
that
exactly.
that would manage all of that with me.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody's really ever talking to each other. The
Mm-hmm.
the the person is left to kind of get them
Deal
all.
with it on their own.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right.
Figure it out yourself. Yeah.
And so it's like that's again beyond therapists and coaches. It'd be awesome if we
Mm-hmm.
could come together as a community, as a support for humanity. That's really what we
Mm-hmm.
are, regardless.
Yeah. I think they're unlocking different aspects of the same human being,
Mm, yeah.
right?
So trust yourself first. Look back at your history and also your genetic history and see if there's anything that you should be aware of coming. And I say that because I feel I'm an elder millennial and we're finding out late in life that we actually have deep genetic psychological conditions in our family because they didn't talk about it. So like
Mm-hmm.
we find out late, this is on the horizon. So getting out there, talking more about within your family, what is happening, what are trends, what do we have in our own bloodlines? And then what do you need as a personal, like an individual on
Mm-hmm.
a mind, body, and spirit level to feel your favorite self? And
Mm-hmm.
then talk to some people like Sarah and I and say, what does this sound like for me? Like, what does it sound like I quote unquote need? Well, you're part of that decision making process. So you're leading the
Mm-hmm.
process, but find
Yeah.
someone that you trust and care about and
Mm-hmm.
don't just go toward the easiest thing. I will
Mm-hmm.
tell you, and I'm wondering if you'll agree, Sarah, there is no quick fix. There is no thing that you can buy that will
Mm-hmm.
get you into or out of a
Mm-hmm.
place where you want to get to. You have to go through. The work is through. As we start to wind down, Dr. Sarah, to recap, what would you share from your perspective, the relationship between coaching, therapy, and spiritual healing?
Hmm. The relationship. Well, I think the people who go under it, I think all genuinely want to. In many ways, if we're going to use the same term, we all do want to heal, right? Maybe we want to heal the mind, or even putting doctors in, right? Like doctors want to heal the body, like therapists want to heal the mind, like life coaches want to kind of heal your life path, right? Spiritual healers want to heal this life and the last life and the future life, right? I think when we just think of them as different aspects of healing, and I think sometimes we're afraid to say that because it's like people think of that as like, oh, only healers heal. But like actually like you're kind of more healing like on like a soul level, right? But there are a lot of different aspects of our lives to heal. And I think all of us really want many different aspects of us to be healed, right?
Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
something super spiritual. There is no past, present, or future. It's all now.
Mm-hmm.
And something that
Mm-hmm.
could like blow somebody's world. It's like, what? Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're actually
Yeah.
we're like multi-dimensional beings and we've
Mm-hmm.
already experienced the future version of us. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
another day.
Yeah.
So Dr. Sarah, where can we find you and support your work?
I don't practice anymore as a psychologist. The therapists in the practice are just great. My role now is to be supporting them, guiding them, like figuring out who they want to be as therapists. They work with trauma, they work with other things. Right now, my mission in life is my app. It's really wanting to reframe the entire way we think about people's relationship with food. And, that's where I really want people to follow me. People can follow me on Instagram. I kind of talk about everything I'm doing. So that's Dr. Sarah Speaks. People could find me on my website. People could find me on LinkedIn. I'm findable and I
And
love
what
connecting.
amazing. And what's the app?
The app is Bia Better Eating. So biabettereating.com.
Awesome. And
And
you can find that on iOS, Android.
yep.
And
Yeah.
for me, Amy, find me at unlockthemagic.org and find me on LinkedIn, Blue Sky. Closing remarks, Dr. Sarah, as we wrap up.
First of all, I guess I just want to really thank you for having me on this. I feel like we just have such a great connection, and it's so great to have this conversation with a person who understands the nuances and isn't trying to demonize one side, trying to have a conversation around it. I think you're doing wonders for anybody listening to this because you might spark somebody because so many people are like, well, what is it that I need right now? And helping people understand the difference. Maybe people are realizing, wait a minute, I need all three. Maybe some people are realizing, oh, I thought I needed this, but actually I need that. So I just want to thank you for having me today. And I'm glad that I could even contribute to the conversation.
Thanks for sparking it out on LinkedIn to say like, hey, y'all, can we come together? And the more for any coaches, any therapists listening to this, may you find your own opportunity to lean into the conversation like Dr. Sarah and I have. Let's not be afraid or jealous of each other. Let's lean into it and say, we're all here to serve and help heal. So let's do that together. Oftentimes the individual will need both of us, not just one. Thanks so much.
Thank you.